Who did this to you?
I can't tell you here.
Are you hurt?
No. But if they find me, both of us are in danger.
Stay behind me.
Wait, those are my father's cars.
Your father?
He's a billionaire. And you just saved his daughter.
The alarm on Liam Carter's phone went off at 4:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was supposed to, because the phone had learned the way machines learn things that Liam was already awake. He was sitting on the edge of the sofa, lacing his work boots in the dark. The apartment was small enough that the street lamp outside pushed a thin orange rectangle through the blinds and laid it across the carpet like a dropped towel. He worked by that light. He'd been doing it long enough that his hands didn't need more. The sofa was his bed. It had been his bed for 14 months, ever since he'd moved the twin mattress into Sophie's room. His daughter was 6 then, afraid of the dark, and the sofa was close enough to her door that he could hear her if she called out in the night. He told himself he'd move the mattress back when she got older. She was 8 now. The sofa had developed a permanent valley in the left cushion, shaped exactly like him. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and moved quietly to the kitchen. The apartment was a second-floor walk-up in Bridgeport, 3 blocks from the highway. In summer, it smelled like cut grass and exhaust. In winter, and it was deeply, unforgivingly winter now. The second week of January, it smelled like nothing, because he kept the windows sealed with weather stripping he'd bought at a hardware store, and applied himself one Saturday afternoon while Sophie drew pictures at the kitchen table and narrated what she was drawing in a voice that expected him to respond every 30 seconds. He'd responded every 30 seconds. He'd also done a precise job on the weather stripping. Both things were true about him, and he was aware of both. That he was thorough, and that he was present, and that those two qualities were sometimes a burden, and sometimes the only thing that kept the structure upright. He made coffee in a French press his sister had given him when his wife, Dana, left. His sister had meant well. He used it every morning. He didn't think about Dana often anymore. She was in Portland now, remarried, doing something in sustainable architecture, and the fact that he knew this was because Sophie told him things Dana had told Sophie, and he listened carefully and said the right things and meant them. It was possible, he'd come to believe, to wish someone a good life without wanting to share it. Possible, and, after sufficient time, not even painful. Just a fact. Like weather, he drank standing at the counter, watching the snow. It had started sometime around midnight and hadn't stopped. The street below was unmarked. No tire tracks, no footprints. Just a smooth white surface that the orange street lamp turned the color of old paper. He estimated 4 inches already. Maybe 5. That would make the yard at the salvage operation slower to move through and harder to see. Which meant he'd have to be careful. Which meant the morning would take longer than it should. He was okay with that. Long mornings were something he understood. He poured the rest of the coffee into a thermos, clipped it to the strap of his bag, and walked down the hall to Sophie's room. He pushed the door open 2 inches. She was asleep on her side, one arm hanging off the mattress, fingers almost touching the floor. Her hair was splayed across the pillow in every direction. She looked like someone who had fallen from a considerable height and landed without harm. He stood there for a moment, watching her breathe. "Okay," he said, to himself or to her, or to no one in particular. He pulled the door back to 2 inches. He left a note on the kitchen table, in large print back by noon. Cereal in the pantry. Don't open the door for anyone, and let himself out into the cold. The salvage yard was 20 minutes by truck, longer in snow. Liam drove a 2009 Ford F-150 with 190,000 miles on it, and a heater that worked on the driver's side only. He wore insulated coveralls over his jeans and a canvas work jacket over that, and still felt the cold in his wrists and across his shoulders. He kept both hands on the wheel. The yard was run by a man named Gerald Briggs, who was 63 and had operated the business for 30 years, and possessed the particular combination of reliability and surliness that Liam found easy to work with. Gerald didn't ask questions about why Liam had taken a part-time salvage job when he'd spent 12 years as a licensed electrician. Liam didn't ask questions about Gerald's accounting practices. They got along fine. Liam had a key to the side gate. He let himself in at 5:40 a.m., signed the log in the shed, pulled a cart from the rack, and started his sweep of the south lot. The south lot was where the recent arrivals went, cars towed in within the last 2 weeks, waiting to be processed, stripped, and crushed. Most were ordinary, domestics with blown transmissions, water-damaged SUVs from a November flood outside Calumet City, a cluster of older sedans that a dealership had unloaded. Liam moved through them with a flashlight and a clipboard, noting VINs and visible damage, doing the initial assessment Gerald needed before anything could be logged into the system. The snow made it slower. It also made it quieter. The city, even Chicago, even at 6 in the morning, seemed to have retreated behind the snowfall, and the only sounds were the scrape of his boots and the soft displacement of snow as he moved between cars and the distant moan of a highway that never actually went silent. He heard it at 6:14 a.m. He would know the time exactly later, because the detective asked him repeatedly, and he'd had reason to check his watch at exactly that moment, having just finished logging a Ford Explorer and glanced down to note the time. Thud. A pause. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Thud. He stopped. The sound was coming from his left, the far end of the row, where the new arrivals were parked tightest. He moved toward it without deciding to move. Flashlight up. The car was a BMW 7 Series, black, less than 2 years old by the plates. It had no visible damage, no broken windows, no dents, no sign of a collision or the kind of mechanical failure that sent cars to a place like this. The snow on its hood was undisturbed. It had been here since before the storm, which put it at sometime yesterday afternoon. That was wrong. Gerald processed arrivals personally, and Gerald would never have logged a car in this condition without calling Liam to look at it first. That was the arrangement. Something hadn't followed the arrangement. Thud. Coming from the trunk. Liam stood still for 1 full second. He was a practical man, and had a practical man's instinct for not imagining things. The sound was real. The sound was inside the car. He moved to the trunk, found the emergency release seam by feel, and pulled. The trunk opened. He aimed his flashlight. The woman inside was on her side. Wrists zip-tied behind her back, and ankles bound with the same. She was wearing the remains of what had been an expensive charcoal blazer, one sleeve torn. There was dried blood at her temple, not fresh, and a cut above her left eye that had scabbed. Her coat, a long wool overcoat, had been thrown over her like a blanket rather than worn. What Liam noticed most was her eyes. They were open. They had been open before he raised the flashlight. She had heard him coming, and she was watching him with an expression that was not fear, exactly, or not only fear. It was something closer to calculation. She was doing math, deciding, rapidly, what she was dealing with. "How many people are in this yard?" she said. Her voice was controlled. Hoarse, but controlled. "Just me." "What time is it?" 6:15. A little past. She processed this. "How far are we from the nearest road?" "Quarter mile, maybe." "There's a gate." "It's locked." She nodded once, as though confirming a suspicion. "Cut the ties," she said. "Then we need to talk fast." He was already pulling the utility knife from his coverall pocket. Her name was Emma Reynolds. Liam didn't know that yet when he helped her out of the trunk. He knew she was injured and cold. She'd been in there at minimum 6 hours, in January, and in an unheated vehicle, and that she moved with the controlled deliberateness of someone working through pain without wanting to show it. He knew she was wearing clothing that cost more than his truck. He knew she had asked intelligent questions in the right order. He wrapped his canvas work jacket around her and steered her toward the shed. She walked without assistance, which seemed like a decision rather than a capability, as though accepting his arm would have meant something she wasn't prepared to mean. In the shed, he had the coffee thermos and a first aid kit Gerald kept on a shelf above the heater. He set the coffee in front of her and opened the kit. She watched him assess the cut above her eye. "It doesn't need stitches," she said. "Probably not. But it needs cleaning." She let him clean it. She drank the coffee. It was a few minutes before she spoke again, and when she did, Her voice had changed slightly, not softer, exactly, but less compressed. "I need you to understand the situation," she said. "Before I ask you what I'm going to ask you." "Okay. My name is Emma Reynolds. I'm the CEO of Reynolds Capital Group. We're a mid-sized technology holding company based in the Loop. 3 weeks ago, I declined an acquisition offer from Halcyon Consolidated, a larger firm run by a man named Victor Hale. Last night, 2 of Hale's people followed me out of a parking structure on Wacker and subdued me. I was put in that trunk. The plan, as far as I can tell, was to hold me somewhere until I was willing to sign a transfer of voting shares." She paused. "I wasn't willing. So they put me back in the car and left me somewhere they thought was out of the way." Liam looked at her. "You need to call the police." "Yes. But not yet." She met his eyes. "If I call right now, in the next 20 minutes, there will be a news cycle before noon. Victor Hale is well connected. He will know I've surfaced before my security team knows I've surfaced. And my security team are the people I need to be able to trust first. I need 20 minutes to make 2 phone calls, and I need to make them from somewhere that isn't this yard, because I don't know if this location is being watched. You think they'd come back? I think they sent someone to verify I was still secured, and I think when that person finds the trunk empty, they'll do one of 2 things: run or report." She set the coffee cup down with a precise, controlled movement. "I'd like to be gone before we find out which." Liam thought about this. He was not, by disposition, someone who involved himself in things that weren't his business. He'd spent most of his adult life drawing careful lines around his business and staying inside them. He had a daughter asleep 3 miles away. He had a job, a truck, a French press, and a sofa with a valley in it shaped like him. He had reasons to say, "I'll wait with you while you call 911, and then I'm done." He picked up the keys off the hook by the shed door. "Truck's out front," he said. "Let's go." They drove north on the highway. Snow was still falling. Liam kept the speed down and both hands on the wheel and the heater on full, which helped her side of the cab and did nothing for his. Emma made her calls. The first was brief, 2 sentences to a number she dialed from memory, a woman's name he didn't catch, and afterward she stared out the window for 60 seconds before making the second. The second call was longer. By the time it ended, her jaw was set and her hands were still in her lap, which he suspected was an effort. "My CFO is sealing the share register," she said. "My security director is en route to the building." She paused. "Victor didn't just want money. That's what I need you to understand." "What did he want?" "Reynolds Capital has a subsidiary, Meridian Systems. We do infrastructure software. Specifically, we have 2 government contracts involving data routing architecture for emergency communications networks. Not classified, but sensitive. Strategic." She looked at him. "Victor wants access to those contracts. If he controls my voting shares, even temporarily, he can force a board vote and restructure the subsidiary before I can get an injunction." "How long has this been going on?" 18 months. It started as a standard acquisition approach. Reasonable offer, reasonable terms. I declined because I didn't trust his intentions toward the Meridian contracts specifically. He escalated litigation, a proxy campaign, regulatory complaints. All legitimate, expensive and unpleasant, but legitimate. She turned to look out the window again. Last night was not legitimate. Liam merged off the highway onto surface streets. The city was beginning to wake up. A few early buses, headlights punching through the snow, a lone figure in a yellow vest salting a sidewalk in front of a pharmacy. "Why didn't you call someone last night?" "From the trunk. My phone was in my coat pocket. They put the code in with me as an oversight. I think they didn't check it. But my hands were behind my back for the first 5 hours." She held up her wrists. There were deep marks from the zip ties, already beginning to bruise. "I managed to work the code around in front of me about an hour before you found me. The phone was dead. I'd been trying it for 40 minutes. She looked at the bruises, without expression. "So, I knocked." He thought about what that meant about the calculations a person makes, in the cold and the dark, deciding to keep knocking on metal and hope. "Okay, he said. He didn't say anything else for a while. Emma didn't either. But the silence between them had changed in a way that Liam noticed without being able to name precisely. He pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on South Halsted while they waited for her security director to arrive. The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and eggs and old grease in the way that good diners do. And Emma Reynolds sat across from him in a booth and wrapped both hands around a mug and looked, for the first time, like someone who had been through something, not broken, not shattered, but through something. The waitress was a middle-aged woman named Cheryl, who looked at Emma's cut forehead and then at Liam, and then back at Emma, with the particular measured expression of a person who has seen trouble in her diner before and has decided that coffee, and not questions, is the appropriate response. She refilled their mugs twice without being asked. Emma looked at the table for a while. Liam had the sense that she was doing something internally reorganizing, reassessing with the same deliberateness she'd applied to everything else, not shutting down, running a process. "Tell me about your daughter," she said. He looked at her. "Why?" "Because you mentioned her when I asked why you came back into the yard for a second sweep, and you said you tell her that if something seems wrong, you don't rationalize it, you check." She looked at him steadily. "She's 8. You told her that." "She's curious," he said. "She asks me how things work." I try to give her the actual answer, instead of a simple one. "What's her name?" "Sophie." Emma nodded. She looked out the window at the snow, which was beginning to slow. "I don't have children," she said. "I made that choice deliberately, in my early 30s, and I don't regret it. I want to be honest about that. But there's something about the way you said her name. How'd I say it? Like it's the fixed point. Like everything else is relative to that." He didn't answer. She was right, and they both knew it. And answering would have been a less honest response than silence. "She waits for you," Emma said, "every morning. I text her when I'm 15 minutes out. And she gets up and she's at the table with whatever project she's working on when I come in." He paused. "Right now, it's a book about codes and ciphers. She's very interested in how things mean other things." Emma smiled. It was a small, unguarded expression that passed quickly. But it passed through her whole face, rather than just across the surface of it. "Not every child has a father who comes home," she said. Then, before he could respond, "I mean that as a statement of fact, not sentiment. I know how you meant it." She looked at him again, and there was something in it that wasn't assessment anymore. Not quite. Outside, a black SUV was pulling into the lot. Her security director, a large and precise man named Caldwell, came through the diner door with the particular bearing of someone accustomed to arriving in situations that had already gotten away from him. Emma stood, spoke to him in a low voice for 30 seconds, and then turned back to Liam. "I need to go," she said. "But I want your number." She paused. "For the statement. For the police report." "Right," he said. "And perhaps other reasons," she said carefully. He wrote his number on a napkin. She took it and folded it once, precisely, and put it in the inside pocket of the coat she'd taken back from him. The call came from Caldwell 4 hours later. Liam was home by then. Sophie had eaten cereal and was at the kitchen table with the cipher book and a spiral notebook in which she was carefully encoding and decoding messages. He had made eggs. He had sat with her and answered questions about the difference between a substitution cipher and a transposition cipher with the deliberateness of a man who had looked it up once and retained it because she had asked. The call was short. Caldwell said that a vehicle had been identified on surveillance footage from the salvage yard, a black Escalade. Plates traced to a shell company linked to Halcyon Consolidated. It had been parked outside the yard gate from 5:55 a.m. to 6:23 a.m. It had left heading east. "That's 9 minutes after you drove out," Caldwell said. Liam processed this. "So they saw us leave. Likely. We're treating it as confirmed observation, not confirmed identification." A pause. "Miss Reynolds wanted you to know." He thanked Caldwell and stood in the kitchen after the call, his back to Sophie, thinking. They'd seen the truck. They might have the plate. They knew someone had pulled her out. They didn't know who yet, or if they did, they were deciding what to do about it. Victor Hale was a man who thought in steps, and the first step would be information. Identifying Liam. Understanding what Liam was. Assessing whether Liam was a variable to be managed or a variable to be eliminated from the equation entirely. Liam was an electrician turned salvage worker who lived on a second-floor walk-up in Bridgeport. He was not, on paper, a threatening variable. He was also the person who had driven Emma Reynolds away from a location before a Halcyon vehicle arrived to verify she was still secured. That made him a complication, and people who ran organizations that kidnapped CEOs were not people who tolerated complications without addressing them. He turned around. Sophie was bent over her notebook, encoding something. "Hey," he said. "How about we do something different today? Get lunch out. That place you like on 31st. She looked up. She had Dana's eyes, which were dark and too perceptive for comfort. "You have your worried face on. I have my regular face." "You have your worried regular face," she said, "which is different from your normal regular face because your jaw does a thing." He touched his jaw. It was, in fact, doing a thing. "The burger place," he said. "My treat." She considered this. "You're going to tell me what's going on. When there's something to tell you." "Yeah." She closed the notebook. "Okay," she said, in the measured tone of someone extending more trust than was strictly warranted, which was, he thought, one of the more accurate descriptions of what it meant to be someone's child. Emma Reynolds held a conference call from the back seat of Caldwell's SUV at 9:15 a.m. He wasn't on it. He didn't know this until she called him afterward and described, in the compressed, precise way she described things, what had happened. Her CFO had locked down the share register and flagged the attempted unauthorized access by 2 Halcyon agents who had tried to contact 3 board members overnight. Her legal team had filed an emergency protective order application. Her head of communications had drafted a statement that she'd rewritten in 11 minutes and released at 9. "It's out," she said. "The abduction, the general shape of it, how's that going?" "Predictably. The financial press is running it as corporate warfare. The general press is running it as a crime story. Both are accurate." A pause. Victor released a statement denying any knowledge of or involvement in the incident and expressing concern for my well-being. "Do you believe him?" "No." "What do the police think?" "Detective Hargrove is handling the investigation. She's thorough. She's also been very interested in you. A beat. In the best possible sense, she wants a full statement. But she noted that you didn't call 911 immediately. You told me not to." "I did. I told her that." Another pause. Shorter. She was not entirely satisfied with the answer. "I'll come in. I've already arranged it. This afternoon, if you're available." She said it in a tone that acknowledged the strangeness of the sentence, "if you're available," given that she had effectively rearranged his morning. "Sophie's at a neighbor's for the afternoon anyway." "Good." Then, more carefully, "Liam, I want to be honest with you about something. I am very good at being in control of situations. It's not an affectation. It's how I function. This morning I was not in control of the situation. And you were. And that is not a dynamic I've experienced very often." She stopped. "I'm not sure what to do with it." He thought about the diner and the way her smile had passed through her whole face. "You don't have to do anything with it," he said. "Not yet." A silence. "All right," she said. Her name was Patricia Hargrove, and she was 51, and she had the manner of someone who had spent enough time in interview rooms to have stopped needing to perform authority. She simply had it, the way some people carry stillness, not as an absence of energy but as its concentrated form. She was tall and wore a gray blazer over a dark sweater, and carried a black notebook she didn't open for the first 20 minutes of the conversation. The room they were in was not the dramatic kind of room. No one-way mirror. No single overhead bulb. It was an ordinary meeting room with fluorescent lights and a water cooler and 2 chairs and a small table. The ordinariness, Liam suspected, was intentional. People said more in ordinary rooms. She looked at Liam across the table for a long moment before she said anything. Then, "Walk me through the sequence." From the point you heard the sound. He walked her through it. She listened without taking notes, which he found either impressive or unnerving. And then she asked 3 questions. Why he hadn't called 911 from the yard, who else had access to the yard at that hour, and whether he had touched anything in or around the BMW beyond the trunk release and the zip ties. He answered all 3 accurately. Hargrove nodded slowly. The man who owns the yard, Briggs. He logs all arrivals himself? Normally, the BMW wasn't logged. That's what I was thinking about when I went back through the south lot. Something felt off about the row count. You counted the cars. It's part of the assessment. You learn the lot. She looked at him with the expression of someone recalibrating a prior estimate. And you said nothing to Briggs before you left? He wasn't there yet. I left a note on the log saying I'd found an unlisted vehicle and was handling a situation. That's the protocol for anything anomalous. Note on the log in a call when you're able. When did you call him? 8:15, after I dropped Emma Miss Reynolds with her security director. He paused. Gerald was not pleased. I imagine not. Hargrove wrote something in the notebook. What did you tell him? That I'd found someone in the trunk of the BMW and had taken them somewhere safe. He looked at her. He told me I should have called him first. I told him I'd made a judgment call. He said next time I make a judgment call, I should at least call him during. He paused. We're fine. Hargrove looked like she almost smiled. Miss Reynolds tells me you drove her to a diner on South Halsted, she said. Yes. Why that diner? It was warm and open and off the highway. She needed to make calls somewhere she could sit down. Not your apartment? He looked at her. We'd known each other for about 25 minutes. Hargrove nodded, the nod of someone filing something. You have a daughter, Sophie, 8 years old. She was at the apartment? Asleep. I was back before she woke up. Hargrove wrote something, then the first thing she'd written. He watched her do it and didn't ask what it was. I want to be clear about something, she said, setting down the pen. You're not a suspect. You're a witness who made a series of judgment calls under unusual circumstances, and most of those calls I understand, even the ones I might have made differently. She met his eyes. But I need you to understand that the people who put Miss Reynolds in that trunk are still unidentified as individuals, even if we have a very clear picture of who directed them, and they now have reason to be interested in who found her. I know. Do you? They were parked outside the gate when I left with her. They saw my truck. Hargrove looked at him steadily. Yes, she said. They did. She slid a card across the table. That's my direct number. If anything feels wrong, a car parked where it shouldn't be, a call you don't recognize. Anything out of pattern, you call me before you do anything else. She paused. I understand you have a habit of checking things that seem off. He looked at the card. Emma told you that. She did. Something shifted briefly in Hargrove's expression. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. She said it was good instincts. He put the card in his pocket. What happens to Victor Hale? That depends on what the evidence supports. Hargrove stood and buttoned her jacket with the deliberate motion of someone closing a door. But in my experience, men like Hale make the mistake of thinking the first move is the dangerous one. It's usually the second. She looked at him. Because by the second, someone's already watching. Emma called him that evening from her office. He could hear the building around her through the phone, the low hum of climate control. The distant punctuation of a phone ringing somewhere down a hall. She was back in her environment, and he could hear that too, in the cadence of her voice. The shed and diner version of Emma Reynolds and this version were the same person, but organized differently. Victor won't be arrested this week, she said. Hargrove was honest with me about that. The men who physically abducted me are identifiable. We have footage, we have the vehicle trace, but establishing Victor's direct order is a longer project. What does that mean for you? It means I operate normally. I go to work, I run my company. I don't behave like someone who's afraid. She paused. It also means I watch what he does, because Victor made a fundamental strategic error last night, and part of me is genuinely curious whether he knows it. What error? He showed me what he's willing to do, she said. For 18 months, I treated this as a hostile business dispute, aggressive, damaging, but within a known framework. I had models for it. Last night, he stepped outside the framework, which means I now have information I didn't have before. Liam was sitting at his kitchen table. Sophie was in her room doing homework. The apartment was quiet, in the specific way. It was quiet when she was occupied, and nearby a habited quiet, not an empty one. "You're not afraid?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm many things," Emma said. "Afraid is one of them, but afraid is not the largest one." "What's the largest one?" A pause. Not evasive, deliberate. The kind of pause that preceded an honest answer, rather than a careful one. "Angry," she said. "Because he put two people between his fingerprints and that trunk. He stayed clean. And men who stay clean rely on the assumption that the person they've wronged will prioritize safety over consequences. Victor's entire strategy depends on me being more interested in protecting what I have than in dismantling what he's building." Her voice was level and precise, and underneath it was something that was not loudness but was its structural equivalent. "He's wrong about that." Liam said nothing for a moment. Outside, the snow had stopped. The street was still, and the street lamp was making the same orange rectangle on the carpet. "He knows you by now, though. 18 months of watching you. He knows how I operate in a professional context," she said. "He's watched me litigate, negotiate, deflect. He's seen me run the board and manage the press and hold the Meridian contracts through a proxy campaign that would have broken most people." Her voice was level and precise, and underneath it was something that was not loudness but was its structural equivalent. "What he hasn't seen is this. Because I've never been this before." "What's this?" A silence. "Not long. Someone who has something personal in it," she said. Liam didn't say anything to that. He let it land the way she'd asked him to let things land. Without deflecting. "I don't mean you specifically," she said, carefully. "I mean Sophie's school. I mean a man making a phone call to a father to say the name of his daughter's principal." Her voice was still controlled, but barely. The way a river is controlled by its banks, you can see the current. You can see what direction the force is moving. "I built Reynolds Capital over 11 years. Victor can try to take it, that's a business problem, and I can fight business problems. But the moment his people opened a file on an 8-year-old girl, he changed the terms." "I understand that," Liam said. "I know you do. That's why I'm saying it to you." "The daughter of one of my employees," Emma said, changing tone slightly. "A woman in my legal department, her daughter is 9. She told me once that her daughter had a phase where she asked why about everything, every day, relentlessly. Why is the sky blue? Why do we need money? Why do people lie?" She paused. She said the exhausting part wasn't answering. It was that sometimes the true answer was, "I don't know," and her daughter required her to sit with that honestly, instead of substituting something that sounded like an answer. "Sophie's like that," Liam said. "I know. I thought of her when she told me that." A pause. "I think children who ask why grow up to be people who know the difference between a true answer and a comfortable one. Sophie definitely knows the difference." "So do you," Emma said. He didn't argue with that. He was putting Sophie to bed when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He looked at the number for a moment. It was a 312 area code, local. But that meant nothing. He held the phone for 2 rings before answering. The voice was male, unhurried, almost pleasant. Not the kind of pleasant that meant goodwill, the kind of pleasant that has decided pleasantness is the correct instrument for a specific purpose. "Mr. Carter," it said. "My employer wanted me to convey his respect for your actions this morning. It takes a certain kind of character to help a stranger in difficult circumstances." Liam said nothing. He moved out of the hallway, into the kitchen, and closed the door between himself and Sophie's room, with the care of someone making sure a sound didn't carry. "You work hard," the voice continued. "Early mornings. Long days. That kind of dedication makes a real impression." A pause that was not casual. "Raising a daughter alone is no small thing." Liam's hand tightened on the phone. "Hopewell Elementary is a good school. The voice continued. Strong test scores. Engaged parent community. The principal, Mrs. Delacroix, I believe runs a very organized operation. The name of the school. The name of the principal. Sophie's school. Liam stood in the kitchen and felt the cold move through him in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was not panic. He knew what panic felt like. And this was not it. This was something older and more structural. The protective instinct at its root, stripped of everything decorative. You don't need to say anything, the voice said. This is simply a courtesy communication. An observation that the world is full of intersections between professional obligations and personal life, and that wise people are thoughtful about which intersections they choose to stand in. A pause measured, tactical, designed to be remembered. Have a good evening. The call ended. Liam put the phone on the counter and stood with his hands flat on the surface and breathed. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. He'd learned that from a doctor who'd treated him for a stress response 6 months after Dana left, when the apartment was new and Sophie was frightened at night, and Liam had been running on no sleep and too much coffee, and the particular fear of someone who is the only load-bearing wall. 4 in, 4 out. He was not a man who had trouble knowing what he felt. What he felt now was a specific and focused anger. Not the hot, dispersed kind that burns itself out, but the cold, narrow kind that wants a direction and a purpose. He recognized it the way you recognize your own handwriting. He had felt it twice before in his life, at 2 very different people, and both times it had made him careful rather than reckless. This time was no different. He went back down the hall. He pushed Sophie's door open 2 inches. She was reading, the cipher book propped against her knees, making occasional small marks in the notebook. The lamp on her nightstand threw a circle of yellow light over her and the bed and nothing else. And she looked small and entirely herself inside it. "You okay?" she said, without looking up. "Yeah." She looked up then, because she was 8 and had his specific kind of attention, and because she'd learned, from proximity, that yeah delivered in a particular register meant the opposite of nothing. "Is it the worried face thing again?" "Different thing," he said. "I need to make a call." "Go to sleep when you're done with the chapter. 3 more pages. 3 more pages, he agreed. He pulled the door to 2 inches and went to the kitchen and called Emma. She picked up on the second ring. "They just called me," he said. They mentioned Sophie's school. Silence. Not hesitation, she was thinking. "Caldwell," she said, not to him. "Emma, I'm here. I'm here." Her voice was even, but underneath it now was the same architecture he'd heard earlier, the anger that had a direction. "Are the 3 locks on?" "All 3. Don't open your door tonight for anyone who isn't a uniformed officer who you've confirmed through the window. I'm going to have Caldwell outside your building within the hour." A pause. "And I need to call Hargrove." "I was going to say that. I know. I'm already dialing." Another pause, shorter. "Liam." "Yeah. They made a mistake," she said. "Men like Victor understand leverage. What they don't understand is that there are people for whom leverage becomes acceleration rather than a brake." He didn't say anything. "Sophie is a fixed point," Emma said. "I understood that this morning. Victor does not understand it yet. But he's about to." By midnight, the situation had a shape. Hargrove had a team outside both his building and Sophie's school before 10 o'clock. The call had been traced not to Victor Hale directly, and not to anyone Victor Hale would acknowledge employing, but to a number used twice in the past 4 months, in calls to 2 other individuals whose names had appeared in the 18 months of litigation surrounding Reynolds Capital. The thread was thin, but it was continuous, and Hargrove, who had described herself to Liam as a person who liked continuous threads, was pulling it. Emma's legal team filed a second emergency motion at 10:30 p.m., not injunctive this time, but criminal, attaching the phone trace and the vehicle identification from the salvage yard to a formal complaint naming Halcyon Consolidated as a corporate entity implicated in the commission of a kidnapping and a witness intimidation. The wire services picked it up before midnight. Victor Hale's communications director released a statement at 11:47 p.m. expressing bewilderment and promising full cooperation. None of this resolved anything. Liam understood that. He'd spent enough time around systems, electrical systems, mechanical systems, human ones, to know that resolution was a long-distance event. The middle of things looked like middle. It didn't look like ending. He was sitting on the sofa, his valley with a cup of coffee, and the note Sophie had left on the kitchen table before she went to sleep. She'd written it in code. Not a complicated one she'd been working on the Caesar cipher that week, but a real one. Using the system consistently, without errors. He'd decoded it on the third try. It said, "I know you check on me. I check on you too." He sat with that for a while. Emma called at 12:20 a.m. He answered before the second ring. "Are you sleeping?" she said. "No." "Good. I mean, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be glad you're awake. It's fine." He heard something shift in her background. The sound of movement. A chair. "Where are you?" "Still at the office. I've been sleeping here 3 nights a week for the past 2 months anyway. The couch in the executive suite is quite good, actually." A pause. "Better than I assume my couch is. Your couch is probably excellent. It really is." She was quiet for a moment. Not the controlled quiet of the shed or the diner. A different kind. "I've been thinking about what you said, that Sophie's been at the table working on something every morning when you come home." "Yeah. What does she do while she's waiting?" "Between when she wakes up and when you text her?" He thought about this. "Reads. Works on whatever project she's on. Sometimes she draws." He paused. "Sometimes I think she's just sitting there. Being there, waiting in the way that isn't anxious, just present." Emma was quiet again. "I've been waiting for things for most of my adult life," she said finally. "But I'm not sure I've ever waited the way you just described." He looked at the coded note on the table. "I think you have to learn it from someone," he said. "I learned it from her. That seems backwards." "Not really." He set down the coffee. "Kids teach you things. You think you're teaching them. But mostly, you're teaching each other." Outside, the snow was gone from the air and only on the ground now, and the street lamp was making the same orange shape on the carpet that it always made, and the city was doing what cities do at midnight, which is sleep partly and watch partly, and move in the ways that movement doesn't stop. "Liam," Emma said. "Yeah. I'm going to build a case that ends with Victor Hale unable to operate in this market. That's not revenge, it's prevention. He won't stop at one attempt." She paused. "But to do that, I need to work with Hargrove, and I need to document everything cleanly, and I need to not have the narrative get away from me. Which means the next few weeks are complicated." "Yes. And you're inside the complicated part now. Because of me." Her voice was careful. "I want you to know that I know that." He thought about the sofa, and the weather stripping, and the French press, and Sophie's cipher note, and the cold and the sound from the trunk in the morning that had started 13 minutes before his alarm. "I was already inside something complicated," he said. "I just didn't know what kind." A pause. Then, quietly, "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to just let it land, without deflecting. Okay, you could have driven past that trunk. You could have logged the BMW, and moved on and never pressed your ear to the metal, or flicked the emergency release. Most people would have. The math is very clear on that." She stopped. "You didn't. Because you tell your 8-year-old daughter that, when something seems wrong, you don't rationalize it, you check. And I think you tell her that because you live it, not because you decided to be that kind of person, because you already were." The orange light on the carpet, the note on the table, Sophie's handwriting in cipher, which was just Sophie's handwriting, once you knew the key. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said back. A silence that was not uncomfortable. The kind of silence that has something in it, not emptiness, but the thing that comes before the next true sentence, whatever it turns out to be. "Get some sleep," he said. "You had a bad night last night." "I had a bad night that ended well," she said, "which is a different kind of night. Still." "The couch. Yes." A smile in her voice, the same quality as the diner. The same fullness. The couch. She said good night. He said it back. He sat a while longer in the dark, the coded note in front of him, the city quiet outside, the snow on the ground catching the light the way snow does, holding it, giving it back, making something useful out of something cold. He thought about the morning, the sequence of it. The alarm at 4:47, the coffee in the dark, the walk to the truck, the yard in snow, the sound. He thought about how the morning had started as a version of every other morning, the same boots, the same cold, the same route, and had become something else entirely, not because of a decision he'd made, but because of a sound he'd heard, and a choice he'd made about that sound. Check the things that seem wrong. He'd told Sophie that. He told her a lot of things about ciphers and electrical circuits and how to read a weather front coming in off the lake, and what to do if a stranger asked her to get in their car. He told her these things not because he had a philosophy about child-rearing, but because she asked and he answered, and the answers had accumulated over 8 years into something that resembled a philosophy, or maybe a practice. The practice of paying attention, of not rationalizing away the uncomfortable thing. He wondered what Sophie would say if she were older and he told her about this morning. She would ask questions in the order that made sense to her. And eventually she would get to, "Why did you stay? You could have called 911 and gone home." And he would say, "I don't know exactly." And she would say, "Yes, you do." And he would have to think about it honestly, the way she required honesty. And he would say, "Because she was calculating something, not panicking. And I wanted to see what she was calculating." That was the true answer. That was why he wasn't afraid. He was something else. Something newer than afraid. And more directional. He thought, good. Then he got up, turned off the kitchen light, and went to check on his daughter. The case against Victor Hale would take 11 months. The verdict, when it came, would not be the end of anything, but it would be a different kind of beginning. Sophie, who was still 8, would later decode the name Emma from a message left on the refrigerator in Caesar cipher, and would look at her father with the expression of someone who has cracked a code she was already expecting to find. She would say, "I knew it." He would say, "3 more pages." She would say, "Dad." And he would say, the way he said things he meant, "Yeah."